Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner.
787-9 Dreamliner.
To suddenly drop altitude. 50 people were injured.
50 people were injured.
Dropping out of the sky, injuring dozens of passengers.
272 people were flying from Sydney to Auckland on the longest, safest, and one of the most technically advanced flights, Boeing 787 Dreamliner. It had literally cutting-edge avionics, automation, sensors, and engineering designed to survive even the worst failures. So everyone felt relaxed, and the flight seemed routine for the first 2 hours. Until one small, almost negligible component overpowered every layer of technology, sending the flight into an unexpected fall and creating a life-and-death situation for everyone on board. The situation was so deadly that even the aircraft could be split into 2 pieces. But there was no natural calamity, bird strike, or wind shear. Finally, when investigators uncovered real story of LATAM Airlines Flight 800, they were stunned to see how some of the most advanced systems in aviation became helpless before what might be the least important switch in the cockpit. March 11, 2024. A Boeing 787 Dreamliner sits on the tarmac of Sydney Airport, while 263 passengers are settling in. This is one of the longest flights in the world that's flying from Sydney to Santiago, Chile, across the Pacific Ocean, with a stopover at Auckland. So overall, it's a more than 12-hour journey through the sky. But the weather is flawless, the crew is experienced, and the aircraft seems flawless. Actually, the 787-9 was born from ambition. Boeing took the 787-8, which is their first and shortest model, and added 20 feet to its body, keeping the same wingspan but making everything stronger. Boeing targeted the aging 767 for the replacement. Even though the original plan was to launch this in 2010, in reality, delays piled up. And by July 1st, 2010, they finalized the design. But deliveries still kept slipping to 2014, 4 years behind schedule. And then it made 580 deliveries worldwide, including LATAM Airlines in Chile, making it the longest commercial flight ever. On this day, besides the 2 Chilean pilots, are 7 flight attendants who prepare the cabin. So everything is routine, and flight LATAM 800 is ready to go. And finally, at 11:44 in the morning, the engines roar to life. The Dreamliner accelerates down the runway smoothly, and within moments, they're climbing over Australia's east coast to their cruising altitude of 41,000 feet. Which is nearly 8 miles above the Tasman Sea. Since then, the autopilot takes over. Passengers unbuckle their seatbelts. Some start sleeping, while others watch movies or read books. Flight attendants begin the meal service, and in the cockpit, everything hums along with all parameters perfectly normal. Just like that, 2 hours pass without incident. But then when they are about 1 hour away from Auckland Airport, something goes horribly wrong without any warning. In just seconds, this routine flight becomes a nightmare, and the cause is something nobody saw coming. The captain sits calmly in his seat, hands near the controls. Suddenly, his seat lurches forward even though he doesn't touch anything or press any button. But the motorized seat moves on its own, violently and aggressively, pushing him toward the control column. As a result, his body weight shifts. His hands automatically press against the yoke, and the aircraft's nose drops. Hard. Within a moment, the Boeing 787 enters a steep, uncommanded dive. The autopilot disconnects and chaos erupts in the cabin. Things just don't stop there. Objects fly through the air, meal trays lift off suddenly, and dozens of passengers who aren't wearing seatbelts are hurled upward toward the ceiling. Usually, pilots always warn the passengers if they expect any turbulence would come. But this is a violent turbulence that came unexpectedly. Naturally, everyone starts to panic and screams fill the cabin. People literally slam into overhead panels with sickening force. And because of that, some panels crack. Even flight attendants are thrown off their feet. A service cart tips over, and coffee cups arc through the air. And all these happen because of one terrifying fact. The aircraft is falling, in 400 feet in just seconds. It feels like the plane is dropping out of the sky. Passengers grip their armrests. Some start crying while others freeze in terror, and children scream to the top of their lungs. In the galley, a flight attendant crashes into the wall. The sensation is surreal, like gravity has stopped working. And in the cockpit, the captain fights for control. His seat has pushed him too far forward. He can barely reach the controls properly, but the first officer reacts instantly. Together, they wrestle the aircraft back by pulling, leveling, and stabilizing. And after what feels like an eternity, but is really just seconds, they somehow stop the descent. The aircraft becomes steady again, but due to this, they've lost 400 feet of altitude. The good part was that the Boeing 787 didn't break apart, because it never exceeded structural limits from where the aircraft would crack. But the bad news was that enough damage was already done. Meanwhile, 13 people are injured, and even worse, the pilots have no idea what just happened, meaning it could happen again. So the crew makes an emergency decision. This plane is not fit for a 12-hour flight to Santiago, but they have to continue to Auckland anyhow. Because they can't turn back to Sydney as Auckland is closer. They inform air traffic control describing whatever happened. And emergency teams are alerted on the ground. Medical personnel also prepare for the flight's arrival. The cabin crew moves through the aisles, checking on passengers. Some have cuts, others have bruises. A few are holding their necks in pain. Most importantly, 3 people are in serious condition. A flight attendant, a Chilean passenger, and an Australian passenger. And this final hour of the flight is tense. Passengers sit in stunned silence. The captain keeps the aircraft steady. The first officer monitors every instrument. Honestly, nothing else goes wrong. But everyone on board knows they just survived something terrifying, and nobody knows if it would strike again. At 4:26 in the afternoon, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner touches down in Auckland Airport. Fire trucks and ambulances are already waiting. As soon as the aircraft rolls to a stop, paramedics rush on board. Among 12 people who need immediate medical attention, 4 are taken straight to the hospital, and the rest receive treatment on the tarmac. Passengers are still shaking in fear, and everyone had one question. What happened up there? Why did the plane drop? Was it turbulence, or was it a pilot error? LATAM Airlines cancels the Santiago leg immediately and grounds the aircraft. Because now the matter will be thoroughly checked out by the investigators. In the initial hours, they come and photograph everything, interview the crew, and inspect the cockpit. While doing this, their focus is on one specific thing, the captain's seat. Because what they discover soon is almost unbelievable. There's something very small that alone nearly killed everyone. Investigators begin pulling the plane apart piece by piece. The official investigation is led by Chile's Directorate General of Civil Aeronautics, because the aircraft is registered in Chile. But New Zealand's Transport Accident Investigation Commission also joins in. And so does the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, the Federal Aviation Administration, and Boeing send engineers. Clearly, this is no longer a local incident, it's international. First, they remove the enhanced airborne flight recorder, which we call the black box. It's sent to the United States for detailed analysis. Meanwhile, the cockpit is treated like a crime scene. Investigators photograph the captain's seat from every angle, measure its position, examine the rails, inspect the motors, and check the wiring. And eventually, the preliminary report comes out on April 19, 2024, where it confirms what the pilot suspected. The captain's seat moved on its own. It wasn't turbulence, not even pilot error. It was only the seat. Just think about it. The motorized adjustment system activated without warning, even though nobody pressed the button or touched the controls, and the seat lurched forward anyway. And this created a back-to-back chain reaction by pushing the captain into the control column suddenly, forcing the nose down and causing the 400-foot drop. Now the question is, why? What made the seat move suddenly? As the investigators dig deeper, they discover something critical. The seat has a rocker switch on the back, which is protected by a rigid plastic cover. But if that cover is loose, it can trap the switch. And in that scenario, if someone walks past the seat or leans against it, the switch can activate, and nobody would know. Instead, the seat moves automatically and the pilot has no control over it. So far, it sounds like an accident, like an act of God. But what if I tell you that Boeing knew about this problem for years and still neglected it? And for this, we need to rewind to 2017, 7 years before this incident. When Boeing issued a service bulletin to all 787 operators, the warning was clear. Loose switch covers on pilot seats can cause unintended movement. Even airlines are told to inspect the covers. They're told to make sure they're secured properly. But here was the problem: that some airlines complied with this warning, but others didn't. LATAM Airlines was one of the others. They had the bulletin, but the inspections weren't done regularly. As a result, the protective cover on the captain's seat was loose. Maybe it had been loose for weeks or months, and guess what? Nobody cared. But that's only the beginning. The captain's seat had been replaced multiple times, once in Australia, once in New Zealand, and once in Chile. And every time a seat is removed and reinstalled in the cockpit, there's a risk. Because there are so many things that must be done perfectly. Otherwise, bolts might not be torqued correctly, wiring might be misaligned, or locking pins might wear down. Clearly, each installation introduces new variables, and with this seat in this particular aircraft, something went terribly wrong. Indeed, it's a small thing that could be overlooked easily, but this flight proved how big a threat it can become mid-air. So investigators examine the maintenance records. They trace the seat's history across 3 countries, interviewing all the technicians who installed it and asking about torque settings, alignment checks, and if any of them noticed anything unusual. But their answers are vague, which leaves the documentation incomplete. And critically, nobody inspected that rear switch cover. The seat's locking mechanism is also scrutinized. Even a tiny bit of wear on a single tooth can cause slippage. Under normal conditions, the seat holds firm. But under certain pressures, like someone leaning against the back of the seat, things can take a different turn. And that's exactly what happened to this flight at 41,000 feet. A crew member probably brushed against the switch and sent 263 people into freefall. But when the data from the black box comes, it confirms everything. The Enhanced Airborne Flight Recorder is analyzed at NTSB laboratories in Washington. Engineers extract every millisecond of data and see the exact moment the seat motor activated and the electrical signal that triggered it. They also see the control column move forward, the autopilot disconnect, and the altitude drop 400 feet in seconds. Luckily, the G-forces weren't extreme, and that's why the aircraft never exceeded structural limits. So, the plane remained intact. But for unbelted passengers, it was catastrophic. Apart from this, the data shows no mechanical failure. The aircraft itself was perfect. The engines were fine. The flight controls worked flawlessly. So basically, the only problem was the seat with that switch and loose cover. Investigators also confirm there was zero turbulence. Weather satellites show calm skies. On top of that, there was no wind shear or convective activity. This meant the injuries weren't caused by rough air, but by the sudden vertical displacement. And because of this, at one moment people felt weightless for a moment, and the next moment, gravity slammed them back down. The final report takes months to compile, which includes testimony from every crew member, passenger statements, technical analysis from Boeing, and maintenance records from 3 countries. And finally, it includes one undeniable conclusion. What happened to this flight was preventable, only if the switch cover had been inspected properly. If LATAM Airlines had followed Boeing's bulletin more closely, the flight could easily have made it to Santiago safely. But now the entire aviation industry has to face the consequences. Let's fast forward to August 2024, when the FAA issues an emergency airworthiness directive. Every Boeing 787 in the world, be it models 8, 9, and 10, must have their cockpit seats inspected. And for this, airlines have only 30 days to comply. They must check every switch cover, verify every locking mechanism, and test every motorized actuator. And if anything is loose, it must be fixed. If anything is worn, it must be replaced without exception. Boeing sends out reminders to every operator. They emphasize the importance of regular inspections and provide detailed instructions on how to secure the switch covers. They also update maintenance manuals, stressing that even small components can have catastrophic consequences. The message is clear: don't ignore even the tiniest thing. Meanwhile, LATAM Airlines launches its own internal investigation. They want to review maintenance procedures across their entire fleet, retrain technicians, and implement stricter documentation requirements. And besides all these, they also apologize publicly with a promise to cooperate fully with regulators. The 3 passengers who were hospitalized urgently also recovered, but the trauma always stays. Some passengers develop a fear of flying while others file lawsuits, and the entire incident makes international headlines. The aircraft itself remains grounded for 3 days in Auckland. Engineers inspect and replace the captain's seat entirely. After that, they run tests and verify everything is secure. Only then is the aircraft cleared to fly again. But the damage to LATAM's reputation was done permanently, because at 41,000 feet, there's no room for mistakes and no second chances. So what did the aviation industry learn from flight LAA 800? First, redundancy isn't enough. The 787 is one of the safest aircraft ever built. It has backup systems for everything. But a pilot seat, that's mechanical and simple. And this simple thing failed only because, first, human error crept in during maintenance, and second, inspections were missed. The root cause was that a 7-year-old warning wasn't taken seriously enough. The next lesson is that maintenance matters more than people think. Pilots train for emergencies, simulate engine failures, and even practice instrument malfunctions. But who trains for a seat failure? Who expects the furniture to become the threat? So maintenance crews are the unsung heroes of aviation. They must inspect, repair, and document everything with utmost precision. Otherwise, if even the tiniest step is skipped, say one bolt isn't torqued correctly or one cover isn't secured, the consequences can be deadly. And the next big thing was, Boeing's warnings must be heeded. The service bulletin from 2017 wasn't optional. It was a clear directive. But without regulatory enforcement, some airlines treat bulletins as suggestions and don't take them seriously. LATAM didn't ignore it completely, but they didn't prioritize it either. And that's the gap where accidents happen, in the space between should and must. And the final lesson is that the passengers need to stay buckled. 13 people were injured just because they were unbelted. The ones who stayed in their seats were fine. Indeed, the 400-foot drop was sudden, but it wasn't catastrophic at all. That's why the aircraft didn't break apart, and within minutes, the pilots regained control. But if you're standing in the aisle, even a small altitude change can throw you into the ceiling. So the seatbelt isn't just for takeoff and landing, it's for the entire flight. Because you never know when a routine flight will turn into a fight for survival. What do you think this incident reveals about modern aviation? Are we safer today because of technology, or more vulnerable because of the tiny things we overlook? And if a loose switch cover can trigger a 400-foot plunge, what other small details are waiting to be discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you want more deep dives into real events that changed aviation forever, hit subscribe and stay with us for the next story.